I may not be the absolute best speaker you're ever going to see in the world, and I may not be have the best strategy at all times, but I'm going to surround myself with the best people, find the smartest. One of my taglines is, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ed McGill, co-founder and partner, McGill Jungie Wealth Management. I'm also the host of the podcast Led Leadership with Ed, where I'm continuing my own self-journey on leadership as well as helping others in their growth and development. And we're now in our second year of the podcast. So thank you for all of you that join us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Music. Always important to like, comment, and share, and we'll continue to grow our listeners across the country. And as always, new episodes drop every other Wednesday, bright and early. And today we got a special guest, Scott Jean, who is president and CEO of EMC, which is Employers Mutual Insurance Company based here in Des Moines, Iowa. A little over 2,000 employees and top 50 property and casualty company in there. And Scott's kind of an anomaly. He started at EMC as an intern and has never left. So there must be something special there about the culture, this great company, and his leadership skills. So we're going to have fun diving into this. And welcome, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
Yeah, this is going to be great. We heard all kinds of fun things about you from Beth Niggett when she was on a previous episode, one of your tremendous leaders on your executive leadership team, and the continuity and collaboration between that group is really second to none. But, maybe where I wanted to start, you are in the insurance industry, you're on the property casualty side. When you think about how EMC is training or how your leadership team is training the managers to treat the policyholders and the employees, as humans under, very stressful times, not just transactions, tell us a little bit about, this kind of feeling of family that EMC tries to promote to the policyholders as well as the employees there.
Well, we really believe in keeping insurance human. We issued that as our tagline a year or two ago, and it really goes throughout the organization. We treat our team members with respect. We engage in them. We develop them. We help them understand how we want to be represented out in the marketplace with our agents, with our policyholders. And so it's just having that human touch at every interaction. We actually just had an AI meeting this morning, 4-hour AI session with the senior leadership team. But continue to talk about how can we find that balance of, introducing AI and utilizing AI tools, but keeping insurance human in every interaction. So we don't have chat bots that answer phone calls. We have people that answer phone calls. We get out and visit with our agents on a regular basis and have very close-knit relationships. And so it's really been a differentiating value for us. We have found that agents and policyholders really appreciate the human touch that we have, and we just love being out there with the people that we work with on a regular basis.
Well, that's interesting when you say about technology, because, with this human touch, and you said technology should enable the human touch, not replace it. But as a leader, what do you think has been the hardest thing to maintain that or to justify, that human touch? Because there can be a cost to the human touch. And I know for you, it's never, for the company, it's never been about profits only, but you do need to be sustainable. And you've been around for over, I think it's now like 115 years, maybe right around that time period.
Yeah.
So how are you?
11.
Okay. How are you balancing that? And when is it too high a cost, or how are you measuring that right now?
Everything has a cost, right? And technology can be used to replace people. It can be used to enable and empower people and make them more efficient. And the approach we've taken is to really keep it human and use that technology just to equip and empower people. And it does come at a bit of a cost, but I would argue that it doesn't, because we're able to write and do business with companies that want that human touch. They want that human interaction. So like one thing that we are very big on is loss control, risk improvement. Yep. And so, there's this idea of the transfer of risk, which is moving risk from a company, from a client to an insurance company. And there's the management of risk. And so we believe the management of risk will include some transfer of risk, but also engaging with the policyholder, helping to
Hmm.
eliminate injuries to begin with. And that comes at a cost also. But in the end, it actually is more, it's better. We can lower our premiums because we have a safer client. We have that human interaction, a chance to touch base with our clients on a regular basis, and then we stop the injuries from happening in the first place. So there, you think about the idea of an injured worker. Yeah, they can't go back to work, but they also can't go out and play catch with their kid in the backyard. And so the more that we can invest in things like that, keeping insurance human, it benefits everyone. And so even from a call perspective, I've had claim interactions myself with other companies where I've called and sat on hold for an hour, finally got through to an adjuster who knew nothing about me, knew nothing about my claim, and then put me through to another computer, and eventually I got no answers. At EMC, you're going to have a person who's going to be your point of contact. That person is going to answer the phone and have that human interaction. So it does come at a cost, but we believe that that human touch, that a lot of people, a lot of companies are willing to pay a little more for the white glove service that we're able to provide.
That's a great point of just then saying who is our target market, who's going to appreciate this, and also playing the long game. Because short term, they may have some impact, or some other companies that go all automotive or automative that they could, maybe have a short term increase, but then long term, they're going to have people like me that just keep screaming into the phone, hitting the button, going agent, agent, because you don't want to talk,
Yeah.
to the texting, on that side. And with your leadership skills, so a couple of things. One, with when you said the human touch, that's great because you don't probably hear that a ton in just the insurance companies in general. You'll see actually a lot of friction, or unfortunately, even some tragic events that have happened, against some insurance company, executives, because the feeling of they weren't human.
Right.
But Beth Niggett, when she talked about you in a previous episode, said, and this was a compliment, by the way, but she said, Scott's not a larger than life figure. And we're going to talk about your background coming up, as an actuary and a mathematician, coming out of Iowa State and stuff. But tell us a little bit about, is there an advantage to being maybe under the radar, like not a larger than life, always having to be on cue, people trying to read you, how you feeling, etc. Tell us a little bit about your leadership style and how being under the radar, because so many of our listeners are probably wondering or hear some things where, God, that person sounds great, but that's not me, or I couldn't be that. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, one thing I've always valued authenticity and just
Yep.
being real and being human. And I never thought of myself as being a CEO. Right. I went to Iowa State, got a math degree, became an actuary, and you don't think of actuaries as being people who are openly engaged with people and overly kind. The joke about actuaries, you can tell the difference between an introverted actuary and extroverted actuary based upon whose feet they look at when they're talking to you.
Yep.
Now, I never quite had that persona, but having that mathematical mind, I just never even thought about leadership as a path that I wanted to pursue. So even in college, I didn't get involved in any in leadership opportunities. But over time, when I began to recognize the leaders that I really appreciated, they were the ones that just took time to invest in people that were real, that were authentic. They weren't pretending to be someone that they weren't. And so, I may not be the absolute best speaker you're ever going to see in the world, and I may not be have the best strategy at all times, but I'm going to surround myself with the best people. Find the smart. One of my taglines is, "If I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room." So, part of my leadership style is saying, what, I'm going to be my real authentic self. I'm going to surround myself with the best people that I can find, and I'm going to listen to what they have to say, and we're going to cast a joint vision together. And so, you can say that's flying a little bit under the radar, but I've really found this to be at least effective at EMC. But as I look around the country at the companies that have been most successful, it's similar leaders that really take on that persona. And it actually aligns well with the book, Good to Great. I'm sure many of
Yep.
you listeners have heard of it, by Jim Collins. But in that book, he talks about level 4 leadership versus level 5 leadership. Level 4 leadership is what people typically think of as a CEO, right? Someone who is a dictator. They get out there, they cast a vision, they say, this is what we're doing as a company, and I expect everyone to align. Well, Jim Collins calls that a genius with 1,000 helpers. He also talks about level 5 leadership, which is a paradoxical blend of confidence and humility, which you don't necessarily think of a CEO being humble, but having that balance of confidence, but also the humility to be able to listen and understand what others are saying and being your authentic self. Those types of leaders are the ones that Jim Collins talks about, level 5 leadership, taking a company from good to great. And that's kind of how I've
Yeah.
modeled my leadership as I've emerged as a leader over the years.
That's awesome. And Jim Collins, I- I'm I know someone that's good friends with him, and his new book is coming out here shortly, where it's like 50 chapters and two leaders in each chapter. So really talking about some of the contrasts and what he learned. And so I would urge everyone to watch or listen to Good to Great, whether on the audiobook or read it. And then this next one's supposed to be awesome. What I found interesting though there is you said, you know, you never had aspirations to being a leader, or you just didn't even think potentially that that could have been a path for you. Do you think that allowed you to surround yourself with other incredibly bright people because maybe along the way your ego wasn't, I have to be the CEO or that's my ultimate goal and I'll kind of stomp, crush some people along the way. Whereas you said, no, I'm collaborative, I'm authentic. Let's figure out how we solve this. It sounds like that was actually a huge advantage that it really wasn't in your mind early on.
No, it certainly wasn't, and so I was humble enough to recognize I didn't have all the answers. I was a good actuary, not a great actuary, but just over time, that just kind of emerged. Even as I was going through this process 7, 8 years ago, as the company was thinking about what the CEO might look like of the future, I did a lot of training and went through a lot of testing. And one thing that came back, which I was very proud of at first, was like, Scott, on a scale from 1 to 100, you are 99.9 on collaboration. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. Fantastic. And the evaluator said, no,
That's
no,
actually not good.
not so much for a CEO. And I'm like, what do you mean? So as we began to talk and explore that, so yeah, someone who's wants to collaborate on everything, maybe not your typical CEO, but the question is, how can you recognize what you need to do to be a better, more confident leader? And so, as I've evolved over time as a leader, and no leader is ever fully baked. We've always got opportunity to improve. Recognizing when I need to step up and make a decision, when I need to collaborate, when I need to listen. But at times, actually, my more recent thing that I'm really focusing on this year is decision making is a gift, right? So many times you'll see teams that collaborate, or is there a decision maker, and they'll spend all this time debating. And if there's no clear decision maker, or if you're just taking a vote, you may not have that confidence. And sometimes you just need someone to step in and say, you know what, I've heard what everyone had to say. Here's the decision. Because sometimes even the wrong decision is worse or is better than delaying a
No
decision too long.
decision.
Yep.
Yep, that's what Jean on our team, such a great leader here at McGill Jungie, where she says we've got 60 to 70% of the data. Let's just move and adjust as needed. So, did you find? So you had this high collaboration. Then, were you ever at conflict with the team as you stepped into that role, where they didn't think you would make a decision, or when did you develop that skill set where you had to basically say, "I've heard everything. I'm going to make the final decision and we're going to walk out of here unified." How long did that take for you to be able to do that?
Well, first of all, still work in progress. There are times where I could probably make a decision faster, but and I really want to make sure I'm hearing what people have to say. And there are some times where you want that collaboration, that further discussion to continue, and other times where you just need to make a decision. I've also had a number of things that have come before me even in this past week and said, "Hey, Scott, what do you think on this? You want us to take this to the leadership team and get a decision?" I'm like, "Nope, this is not a huge consequential decision. I'm just going to make that now," and just, oh wow, so we can move forward 3 or 4 or 5 days faster just by having that decision. So it's one, stepping back and looking at what is the gravity of that decision. Two, are there other people that should be empowered to make that decision themselves rather than even having to bring it to me? But three, when is just evaluating when is the right time to just help the team move forward. And so there's no hard and fast rules that I've discovered. It's really kind of feeling it out, knowing your team, and knowing when that decision has to be made.
Well, and I think too, as you came up, as you heard, math background, actuary, very analytical, problem solving. You said in a talk once that you really had to learn how to kind of slow that part of your brain down, the problem solving side, which there really is no left side, right side of the brain. They all work in coordination, but the left side tends to have a little bit more analytical to it. When did you realize that stepping in or solving the problem was maybe either slowing others' growth down or your own growth down?
I had an executive coach for many years as when I was serving at EMC as an executive vice president. So I had oversaw a number of different departments. But through that executive coaching, that's one thing that they recognize. Okay, you're a really good problem solver, but are you teaching people to fish, or are you fishing for them? I'm like, it really struck me. But I remember a very specific moment. This will forever live in my mind, where one of my team members, one of our vice presidents, sent me an email with a problem. It was like a 3 to 4 paragraph describing it all, and I read through it all, and I'm like, okay, I know exactly what to do. So I typed out, I think, 2 or 3 paragraphs. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Boom, and I was just about ready to hit enter, and I stopped, and I said, "What am I doing? I'm solving her problem. So what's going to happen next time? She's going to come to me with a problem, and I'm going to solve it for her. She'll come to me with a problem, and I'm going to solve it for her." So I remember, and I did this very intentionally, Ed. I found the delete key on my keyboard, and I went one character at a time. And it took a while, right? I typed 3 paragraphs, but it was very intentional. I'm going back one character at a time, erasing everything I just typed. And then I wrote one sentence. What do you think we should do? And then she responded back with a plan. It wasn't quite as good as my plan, right? Nothing is ever as good as my plan. But then I was able to have this dialogue back and then ask them questions. So I put myself in coaching mode, just curious. Okay, why do you think this? What about this? And in the end, she ended up almost in the same place that I had, with a very good solution. And the next time she sent me a problem, I did the same exact thing. We had the dialogue. The third time, she said, "Here's the issue that I'm dealing with. Here's my proposed solution. What do you think?" And I looked at it and I said, "Looks fabulous. Go and execute." And so just seeing that, so first of all, having that intentionality of erasing everything in my mind, it really cemented there that I can't be the problem solver. I need to empower and equip people to solve their own problems, help them be more critical thinkers, because that's a skill set that is significantly missing in a lot of our culture today, the ability to think critically, and to help her get there. And then it really empowered her to be more efficient and effective in everything that she does in the future.
Was the purpose of deleting, letter by letter, just to reinforce in your brain to don't do this again? Was that the purpose of the letter by letter? Okay.
Yes, it was almost punishment for myself, right? I'm going to delete it one character at a time, but it was just this reminder, Scott, you can't be doing this. This is not the person you want to be. You want to be someone who's going to enable and empower people to solve their own problems and not be known as that problem solver anymore.
You said, teach them to fish versus fishing for them. I just read in Liz Wiserman's book, Multipliers. She was talking about when you're coaching, just think about a sports event. When was the last time you saw a baseball manager? We're in baseball season right now. The relief pitcher struggling, and the manager goes out there and actually takes the mound and throws and gets the last out. And how many times we take that ball back when we're saying, "No, I'm supportive. I want to give you this leeway," and then we're out on the court with them doing, whether it's relief pitching or the layup drills or playing defense, and you're really not helping them because they're like, "Well, Scott will come out here and clean up because that's what he seems to be doing." And I had a teammate, when I told him that example, she looked at me and said, "Yeah, you do that in client meetings quite a bit." So I was like, dang, okay,
it's so easy to do.
There's room to grow right there for Eddie right there.
Yes.
Oh, that's good. Well, you've spoken, publicly about your faith and being a servant leader, and you're leading in a corporate environment where a lot of leaders don't necessarily, lead with that on their sleeve. How do you balance that, you know, personality, or, you know, letting your faith be known, that is part of authenticity and being real, but also not being too strong in that? Tell us a little bit about how you've tried to navigate that of being true to yourself.
Well, it's interesting. So I actually spoke at the 90 Ideas in 90 Minutes a few years ago, the business records
Yep.
event. And,
Great event.
I had my 10 ideas, but then you're supposed to speak on two or three. And so at this presentation, I talked about three different things. One of them was talking about my faith and living out my faith in the office and being my authentic self. And I remember someone in the crowd at the end of the session had a question, and like, this question is for Scott. I want to know. You say that you're a Christian and that you're your authentic self. How can you be that at work and not offend people? I'm like,
Oh,
okay,
great question.
well,
Yep.
that's a good question. Let's talk about that. So my response was, I want everyone at EMC to feel like they belong. I want everyone at EMC to feel like they are included, like they have a voice, that they can be their authentic self. And if I'm not being my authentic self, how can I expect everyone else to be their authentic self? So this is who I am. This is what drives me. I'm going to be very open, authentic, transparent about who I am, and I expect you to do the same. Now, that might mean that we disagree on some things, but that's okay. We have to find ways of loving each other despite our differences, to getting along despite our differences, and agree to disagree on a lot of different topics. But when we're in the workplace, I want you to be your authentic self, and I want me to be my authentic self. But what was and Ed, you may want to cut this. We'll see based on. But so at that meeting, then there was a comedian who was also on the panel of that people who had spoken that night. And he said, I got a comment on that. And he says, I think it's a really simple rule. If you're a douchebag, don't be your authentic self. And so then at the end of the whole session, I'm like, you know what? That's probably the wisest thing I heard tonight. If you're a douchebag, don't be. Of course, everyone in the crowd from EMC was like, Scott just said douchebag in a crowd. Like, that's not him, right? But it was a great moment. But there's so much truth in that.
Yeah, no, that is good. And I think really what I heard is you need to be your authentic self, but you can't be judgmental of other people's authentic self. Like, you have to be accepting of that. If you're saying, hey, I'm going to be authentic, but no one else can be, then that's when you disrupt the culture. If people say, that's just who Scott is. I may have a different opinion. I may have a different religion. I may have different political views, but he's just, you know, living his authentic self. So I thought that was great. When Scott, when I think of just how you came up through EMC, so that first part I didn't know was intriguing, where you said I didn't really see a path or hadn't thought about leadership, but then you kept progressing upwards. And part of it on one of your talks I heard was, you know, you moved EMC really into this technology age, and you were working nights and weekends, and you were in this grind, which couple things, you got a lot of things done, so people notice that. People are seeing the hours you're putting in, so people are noticing that. They see your commitment, and then also doing a good job, collaborative and things. So you're getting noticed. But part of that was because you were going above and beyond probably what your stated hours or job said. And do you still need to be that way to excel eventually to the highest levels? Like, if someone said, I do want to be a CEO someday, that just seems like this obsession to excel and to go above and beyond is something that would be needed. Is that what you feel?
I don't know. It's about the hours that you put in. But it is about going above and beyond. It's about being innovative, being creative. You know, I, we and just bringing overall value to your organization. So to me, it's not, hey, are you working nights and weekends? But are you bringing value? Are you bringing additional value? Are you going above and beyond? Are you thinking critically? Those are the individuals that I see that will
Hmm.
have the most opportunity to flourish. And so the story I think you're referring to is um, actuaries used to have reports all over the walls. You'd go pick up 4 or 5 reports, take them back to your desk, and you'd enter numbers into a spreadsheet. You'd take them back, and it was really a glorified data entry is what a lot of time the actuaries are spending. I'm like, that is so inefficient. There's got to
Yeah.
be a better way. Is there a way that we can get data directly from the mainframe pulled into a spreadsheet? And this was back before we had all the data marts that we do today. And my boss said, well, yeah, if you want to look into it, that's fine, but you still get your day job to do. I'm like, well, fantastic. But that's really what took my career off was I found ways of doing this. I learned about the mainframe data. I found ways of extracting it, pulling it into a spreadsheet, started coding VBA code behind the scenes, which led to a whole team that I now had responsibility for to do this for the entire actuary department. And it just kept escalating from there. So, but it was really taking that initiative, going above and beyond. And but you talk about getting noticed, and I
Yep.
think sometimes people do things to get noticed, and but that can come across as being inauthentic. Do things because it's the right thing to do. Do things it because you can really bring value to your organization. Now, sometimes you will get missed, but I would say, as a general rule, those people that are really going above and beyond, that are looking for opportunities to innovate and to really bring additional value to their organization are going to get noticed, and those opportunities will come. Just don't do it. It's all a matter of what your intent is. Am I doing it to get noticed, or am I doing it to really bring value to the organization?
Can you tell when people are doing it just to get noticed? And then how would you coach them or challenge them if you felt this guy keeps putting that up on the LinkedIn, or he puts it up on the the break room board? I mean, I'm being facetious here, but do you have an innate sense when someone is maybe not doing it for the right reasons?
I think a lot of leaders can tell, right? And
Yeah.
and you just see how they interact. You know, where do people give credit? If someone walks in a room and says, "Look what I did! I did this! I did that," and the likelihood is that it wasn't just you, but yet you're the one taking the credit for it. Versus, "Hey, look what my team accomplished. We had a whole team that worked together to bring this great value out of the company. What do you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I bet that person was actually responsible for bringing it all together, leading the initiative." And so, I think a lot of times you can tell.
That's funny, and or not funny, but it made me think. It just happened today. Isaiah, one of our great young professionals, probably 24, we had a client asking about something via email, and there was a lot of math involved, and so I had him do all the calculations, and then I sent it off to the client, and the client said, "Man, that framed it perfectly, exactly what I needed. Thank you." And Isaiah, and then he asked another question. So Isaiah answered the question, but then also said, "By the way, I did all the math here. All Ed did was hit send with a smiley face." And the client replied back with his wife CC'd, said, "We knew it was you anyway, Isaiah," or something like that.
Yes,
But it was kind of interesting where I bet that client's intrigued that Isaiah, who's 24, around there, could, we have that type of relationship. He's a great up and coming foundational piece of the firm, but it was just kind of funny. And then the client recognizing that, saying, "No, we knew that wasn't Ed," on that. So that was funny. And then a second thing, I had another client when you talked about not the hours getting things done. He is in a role of like, CEO of a company, but he's doing it remote. And he was talking about, probably going like another year or two. And his wife said, "Well, why would you stop doing it? You only had like 3 calls today and you were done by like noon or 1." And he looked at her and said, "They're not paying me by the hour. They're paying me for getting things done." And he's moving through a ton of stuff. So hopefully everyone, was, caught that yes, it is going above and beyond, but it really is about results, isn't it, Scott?
it is. And the one thing I would say though is I've seen people that just give up their day job to do the things that they enjoy, the things that they think will get noticed, and that never works out well, right? You
Hmm.
gotta get your basic job done first and foremost, if you want to get noticed for the things that you're doing above and beyond.
Yeah, it really is. When you think about this transition from Bruce Kelly to yourself, and Bruce, very well respected, very well liked, at least from everything I knew and read about him. How long did it take you to feel comfortable making your own decisions, or what type of transition happen there where you really felt, okay, this has actually happened now? Talk a little bit about that transition. I probably got some other tougher follow-up questions on that, but tell me a little bit about that.
Well, so we had two executive vice presidents that were reporting to Bruce leading up to it. So, and he had started to give a lot of decision making authority over the years. So there was some help there.
Hmm.
When I stepped into the role, it wasn't quite as big of a change as you might have thought. But there were a lot of things that were very helpful for me. One of which was COVID, right? So Bruce retired March 17th of 2020.
Oh,
So
geez, right, right at the middle of March of COVID.
So my second day officially in the job, my first day in the office, because I was at a conference down in Miami prior to that. My first day in the office, brought the team together, and we made the decision to send everyone home for 2 weeks to flatten the curve, right? Um, and then we all know what happened from there, and explain
Curve
the
did not
extended
flatten.
bonus
Yes.
moment, right? And so, but what that did was it established me as the leader leading significant change, leading through a significant time of challenges, difficulties, people, not concerned or just concerned about what's happening, not only at EMC, but outside the walls of our company.
Yeah.
And so I started with a working from home with Scott weekly video where I was touching base with team members, talking, having stories, talking about what's happening, started interviewing different people and getting a lot more exposure than the CEO had ever had to all team members across the country. We've got team members in 44 different states across 17 different offices. And so to start something like that, to really establish myself as the leader and not being in the office where people were walking around, maybe still seeing Bruce still walking around doing various things. He served on our board. So,
Yeah.
COVID really did help elevate me fairly quickly. Uh,
Elevate and accelerate, it sounds like, too, with some of the town halls or those. Was everyone in those weekly calls, or certain groups were on there as they were, as you, what'd you call them again, those weekly calls?
Also, the weekly, it wasn't a weekly call, it was a weekly video that we
Weekly video. Okay.
it was a video, something like your podcast, just not quite as
Yep.
long, but it was working from home with Scott. We've now transitioned that to almost a monthly. It's called the Gene Report now, where maybe 10 to 12 minutes episode every month, every 3 weeks or so that goes out to all team members on various topics. But we started doing that weekly back during COVID with working from home with Scott. And then we had a number of challenges that came about. Had the derecho in 2020 also. So
Yeah.
the largest catastrophe event EMC had ever experienced prior to 2020 was about a $40 million event, which was the Parkersburg tornado. The school and the city were both hit. The derecho cost us $180 million. So it was four and a half
Wow.
times the largest event that EMC had ever experienced, also happening in my first year as CEO. Then we also had civil unrest. We had buildings that were burnt in Chicago and Minnesota. So all those things happening that first year. But one thing I would say, adversity brings a team together. Adversity causes you to really step back and really think about things. It's easy to cruise when things are going well, but really to draw a team together and get them working on the same page, working through adversity because you have to, almost fight or fight mode. That was actually a very good timing for us to really establish ourselves as a team and to establish myself as a leader.
That's awesome because it also established with, derecho. And right now there's probably a very large percentage of people Googling what is a derecho because
Yes.
it's not a common term, but it was a huge event in Iowa. But also for you guys to pay claims quickly and on time and all those things that said making insurance more human. It allowed you to set the stage where really you had 3 or 4 different major things just happening so that this transition was really just, hey, you're on, dude. This is yours now with your leadership team, obviously, but really probably accelerated your skill set because the hard came early in that tenure as president and CEO.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that Bruce could have picked a better time from his perspective to retire.
Bruce was smart. He's like, I'm out of here. This is yours
Yes.
now. Oh, that is wild. Was there any decisions that happened where you were like, that probably wouldn't have happened. Not that's going to come out wrong. Not when I said not under Bruce's leadership, but maybe a different kind of decision making or something. You're like, okay, this got through, and I'm not sure that would have happened a year ago or 2 years ago. Does that make sense?
No, and there's a lot to that. A lot of it's the people that you have on your team, people that you're surrounding yourself with. Uh, because of how I structured my team and brought the team together. And you mentioned Beth. She's been on my executive team from the moment I stepped in the role of CEO, and she's brought so much value along with other members of my executive team. Having those right people in the bus enabled us to be more agile, to move faster, to move quickly. When I mentioned earlier being the smartest person in the room, I surrounded myself with people that are smarter than I am, that could work together and really make quick, agile decisions. And I don't know that we were necessarily set up for that in the past.
Yeah, that's interesting. And for those of you, um, it's everyone on their team is incredibly smart, advanced degrees, but also when you mention that human touch and being authentic, your leadership team is about as authentic and just kind and good hearted as any that that I've been around. So that's a testament to what you guys have been able to build. When you think of challenges going forward with the culture and having to adapt to COVID and different things, what are some of the biggest hurdles maybe on the horizon that you're seeing, and how are you guys going to tackle those?
The insurance is very complicated. It's an emerging marketplace, but I think one of the bigger things that we are facing as an industry and as a company is artificial intelligence. How
Yep.
do we allow people experimentation to understand what the capabilities are, but also have the proper governance around it? And how do we keep insurance human in everything that we do? So actually, I use an analogy quite frequently on our approach to AI. And some people think of AI as robots, making decisions, doing all these things. I refer to AI as Iron Man. So if you think of Tony Stark, so Tony Stark puts on an Iron Man costume. Tony Stark is just a human, just like us. He has no superhuman abilities. He can't fly. He doesn't have defense mechanism. He's just as vulnerable as any of us. But he puts on that Iron Man suit, and now he can fly. He can shoot lasers. He has defense things. He can do all these things. He has data coming right before him that Jarvis is feeding him on a regular basis. And then he reacts and responds to his environment with much better information and better equipment, right? That's what we want to do with AI at EMC. We want to equip people. We want to empower people. We want to give them better access to data, better ability to make fast, quick decisions. But we still want the majority of our decisions to be made by people, not by robots. Now, there's the exception. I
It's a
think in
great
one
analogy.
in,
Yep.
in one
Keep
movie,
going.
in one movie, Tony Stark I think Jarvis had to make a decision to save Tony's life. I think he had passed out. He was crashing to Earth, and so Jarvis had to do something to save him. So it's like, yeah, AI can make some decisions, but for the most part, we want people to be at the center of all decisions that we're making.
I love that. Use this Iron Man analogy to accelerate your career, allow you to be the best version of yourself, do things you haven't been able to do. And before I give Scott the last word, I'm going to ask you one last question, Scott. But I thought it was great to hear. It's easy to lead when things are going well. I think of Dan Houston during the financial crisis, a different crisis back in 2008, 2009, and talking about working 7 hour days, 14, 16 hours a week or a day, because there was a lot of businesses, especially in the financial services company, that were struggling to survive with everything going on. And I would clarify one thing. Scott said, surround yourself with people smarter than you in the room, which is a great statement. Just know that there's both street smarts and book smarts, because there is people that have this ability to get things done or intuitive. So smart can mean seeing a path forward, finding out what your genius is, and being able to help that company accelerate or multiply others. So just wanted to know that, at least in my opinion, I've found that I would never be in your boardroom if it was strictly just based on book smarts. But, for a small town kid from Council Bluffs, a lot of times I could get places by having book smarts and then also the street smarts on there too, which is just knowing how to, navigate and get things done on that side. And Scott, the question I would end with you is, when you think about someone that's an up and comer, or you're identifying, these next generation of leaders, what are some of the qualities or things that you're seeing in that group underneath, Ann and Todd and Beth? What are you seeing for some of those, and how do you identify them and then set them up for success?
Well, I think beyond those three, those three are phenomenal leaders. And one thing I would say, first of all, as you're thinking about putting together a team, it's easy to put together a team of people that agree with you. And so one thing when I talk
Yeah.
about smart is also people who will challenge me, who have differing opinions than I do. So Beth and I don't see eye to eye in some things, and that's a positive thing.
Yep.
Another one of my favorite books is Five Dysfunctions of a Team. Number one
Yep.
dysfunction is lack of trust. Number two dysfunction is lack of conflict. You actually want conflict, because if you don't have conflict on a team, that means people aren't speaking their. Either you have everyone that's like-minded on everything, which isn't going to be get you the best answer, or you have people that aren't speaking up. But as I think about the most critical skill sets for up and comers, right? It's that ability to do critical thinking, to be curious, to ask questions.
Yep.
So often I see, recent college graduates or even people throughout the organization that just do things because that's the way we've always done it. They don't ask the questions. They're not curious about it. Or that they just follow instructions. Well, this is what the instructions say to do. Yeah, but this is a different situation. You need to think differently. And so I think those that are going to be the most successful in the future, even college students now, and I've been up at Iowa State, other universities, talking about how we need to pivot our educational system to get people away from regurgitating information they hear and read in a book or hear in a lecture, and turn it into critical thinking. How can we think critically, ask questions, and be curious?
I absolutely love that. Curious, critical thinking. That was a great way to end. That was just really appreciate that, and appreciate you, Scott. And glad we got to spend this 45 minutes together, because I kept hearing, I mean, we know each other personally, but I kept hearing what a great leader you are, and you did not disappoint today. So this is the end of our episode here. If you like it, make sure you are sharing, commenting, just posting it out there then too, as we help people on their journey to leadership. This is Ed McGill, host of the podcast Led Leadership with Ed, signing off with President and CEO Scott Jean of EMC. Thank you so much today for being on here, Scott. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it as well.